Hello, folks. It's George Leoniak, and welcome back to New Geometry, or greetings and welcome for the first time. So today we're going to do a very special video, really specifically around the icosahedron and the dodecahedron as portrayed in Metatron's cube in relationship to some of the new golden circle diagrams that I'm presenting, which are correcting those incorrect forms within that traditional version of the flower of life or fruit of life Metatron's cube. So I really want to just kind of address this more thoroughly and show you, not even with any of the math, just really geometrically how this happens to turn out to be true, that the difference between what you're looking at in Metatron's cube and what you're looking at in the golden circles diagram really is the difference between these two triangles, which are making either an icosahedron or a flat face of an octahedron. So I want to just start off this video here with the sharing the screen as I normally do. And, this really was started because of this, wasn't really inspiration, but, I've been talking about this quite a bit, and I happened to see this Instagram post, and I feel like I really needed to address this a little bit more thoroughly without mentioning any names here. But, in the general consciousness, what we continually see out there is, even some of the top geometers in our consciousness out here right now working in this field continue to like to put out this dodecahedron, icosahedron based on this fruit of life, which really is not, and I'm highlighting here the big icosahedron, is not an icosahedron. So in this, I want to show you why that's not an icosahedron and what an icosahedron as projected two-dimensionally from the third dimension to 2D, what that actually looks like if this is the first time you've seen my videos. So to have a quote like, "To me, the world of perfect forms is primary," when we have, and believe me, this isn't about perfection that I'm addressing this issue from. It really stems from what this locks us into in terms of not being able to expand our geometry beyond just working with the cube, octahedron, and tetrahedron within this fruit of life view, particularly Metatron's cube, and having the phi forms, phi, P-H-I, those forms not representing the icosahedron and dodecahedron accurately, which means that our expansive geometry, which I've been talking about in the implosion videos, is really locked at one plane. So this is going to hopefully clarify this a little bit more fully for you. And so this is the two triangles that I just showed you, and this is how they're portrayed in what the distorted phi, which is, I'm saying it's distorted. Really, it's not distorted. It's just that we're applying this form on top of a geometry that doesn't contain it because we have to put in the golden ratio circle. So right in the middle of this, we have a golden ratio circle that is in golden proportion to this circle right here. And here for the dodecahedron, I had to put the outer circles. And this is really what I call the golden circles seed of life pattern. So you can draw the dodecahedron accurately within this just by adding phi, just by adding that little phi circle. Without it, what we do is we connect the dots like we normally do. And what we've created was two equilateral triangles, right? One with inside the other. So if you've got two equilateral triangles, one with inside the other, if I turn that this way, it's completely flat. So this isn't an icosahedron because that's flat. And if I take this edge to be the back end of a pentagon like this, if that's the back edge of a pentagon, and I want to open it like a door, flip it up like I'm going to flip the lid, because right here is a pentagon that is in the icosahedron. If I flip that up like this, well, that proportion, optically it might look that way, but geometrically, as an orthogonal projection, it's just going to maintain, just like opening a door, that a proportion of 1 to 0.618, let's call it. So as I flip that up, you'll see that this automatically starts to slant in because this is not in proportion, phi proportion to this edge. So it's quite simple that the geometry just shows you this automatically. Whereas if I'm over at the golden circle and I flip up our lid, and all of a sudden that proportion along the edge of the pentagon is in proportion to the back edge. So we know we're looking at a pentagon within this that is just tilted, tilted to match the projection of this hexagon perspective. That's really all that's happening. I mean, it's such a simple correction to just add a phi ratio circle. And then really, all we're doing is just showing the form as it actually is, so that it integrates into our consciousness more on a collective level as sacred geometry continues to blossom and flower in human consciousness here. So I think it's just a good service to humanity to start to at least depict that. If you don't gravitate to the golden circles diagram and you just want to show an icosahedron or a dodecahedron, at least do it with the phi proportion, because as I said, these drawings unlock, and I'm going to get to all that stuff in just a little bit, the much more expansive view of sacred geometry that people who are into this are probably just waiting to happen. Like, where do I go from the typical hexagonal perspective? So, okay, I know I'm spending a little bit of time on this slide, but this is really helping to clarify, at least in Metatron's cube, you don't have to do so many circles, basically. I mean, I know there's a lot of attachment. This iconography is all over the place on t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, Gaia channel. I mean, everywhere loves this symbol, but you don't even really need it. You just really, you do everything in the seed of life and just add some phi relationship circles and you got a dodecahedron. This is meant to build out all these connecting lines, and then you find this little cross line, which, the person who discovered this, I believe, was probably Drinvalo, or at least the one when he talked about it, Melchizedek, in the Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life. He found this one little connecting line here before a workshop and put it in and was like, bingo, we got the dodecahedron. But when we put it to the scrutiny of geometry and just testing that out, it does work as a nice visual, and maybe it is a perspective type of thing. But once again, once you put it into the larger context of this dodecahedron relating to every form in sacred geometry, it's isolated. It's an isolated form. So if we do the flip up test, just like I've described, without any numbers or mathematics, just looking purely at the geometry, there's the back edge. There we go, we flip it up. And of course, we don't have phi proportion between this edge and this back edge. So really, we don't have the phi relationship in those diagrams. They're beautiful, and it does contain a cube, and it definitely is Metatron's cube, but it's not Metatron's dodecahedron. It's the cube that is, can also be a tesseract as well, bringing you to 4D forms. This will also bring you to 4D forms, and I'll show you that in just a little bit. So, okay, one last little thing. I guess I don't need to spend too much time on that on this slide, but here's the icosahedron just built out of the Zoom tools, and you could see that it does have that little dip to the broken version of the equilateral triangle. So when you turn it like this, the edges will slant down appropriately to create the rest of the form. So now here are the two golden seed versions that I showed you that incorporate the phi ratio. So when we flip those up, we get it. But I wanted to just illustrate here when I do proportionally correct this by taking this front edge to be in phi proportion to the back. I just want to show you how far out of relationship these are to phi. If this is the incorrect blue one, this is the red one, that's how much bigger of a pentagon would actually need to be within this space to actually make that fit. It's quite a significantly large pentagon that this is out of proportion. So, if you were even to try and construct this form out of, you couldn't do it out of Zoom tools, you could probably maybe do it out of paper, but it's going to be highly distorted. It's not even going to come close to looking like an icosahedron or a dodecahedron here. So same thing. This, I did a little phi relationship thing here to just figure out how I could adjust for this to show what this pentagon should look like if the front edge of it, this portion of it right here, was in phi proportion to the back edge. And you could see that the blue is extended beyond what the back edge of the drawing is. So that's how much larger it is, how much larger the pentagon should be to correct that full image of it that we're looking at, to have it match the geometry that it's meant to represent. So here we go. This is it again, just, golden seed of life, just doing it smoothly without any problems. This is so easy to draw. We don't have to just stay locked into one size circle. We can modify our compass. That's what it's designed for, to change the radius. So if we change the radius just a few times, before you know it, we're just adding a few extra circles, and it highly, moves us along in our sacred geometry journey. That you can actually create and integrate and relate to these forms at home, with just learning a few of these simple techniques. Okay, so this is really interesting, because now we're going to switch gears and I'm going to move away from that portion. Hopefully that really clarified where I'm going with sharing the sacred geometry that I've been discovering here with the golden circles. But this is neat because I call this the imperfect perfect forms, because well, look at this. We're basically looking at an icosahedron, which if I pick this blue one up that you're looking at in the picture and rotate it around, I can inscribe a circle, circumscribe a circle, or inscribe the circle all the way around this, and it would be contained within a sphere. But looking at my actual diagrams that I was doing, actually working with the Zoom tools, and specifically the star child made this apparent to me, is that there's another view of the icosahedron in here, or an icosahedron, a 20-sided form, that if I pick it up and rotate it around, you'll be surprised that there's the little wow factor, is that when I tilt that, this is 100% accurate to this drawing, 2D. But when I turn the icosahedron to the side of this, it's actually a flattened icosahedron. Here is that icosahedron. But you, on the drawing, we don't know, and I've done this in other videos, we don't really know the depth, and I'll show these at the end of the presentation closer. You don't know the depth of these when it's 2D. So it could be totally flat 2D. It could have a round form in it, or it could be a completely kind of more flattened form. But the amazing thing about this form is it almost felt like I was working with a 4D shape that was making up the whole thing. And there was a bunch of these icosahedrons that have come together to make a larger shape, rather than it just being one icosahedron. So it's kind of neat. That's all in the Star Child video, although I didn't share these within it. But the Star Child was the impetus to make this kind of discovery and build and construct this neat little icosahedron form that I've never seen before. But it came out of, this is the point I'm trying to make, this came out of really working with the correct geometry, so that when and I've got these slide coming up too, so that when I actually make these pentagon shapes that it's made up of, there's phi proportion that is contained within these squished little pentagons, which are actually made, or amusing to make this form. So this is completely a perfect, imperfect or non-regular icosahedron, which is so cool to me. So of course, the dodecahedron was in there too. These are two, 3D forms that, I can hold in hand, that actually, when we look at them 2D like this, so here's the drawing, they are the same drawing. This is the same drawing. Both these dodecahedrons are accurately represented right here. So which one is it? Which one is it? Could it be just flat, or can it like just a 2D? Could it be maybe a part of a 4D shape like this? Or is it part of the just the representation of the 3D form? So this gives us a lot of expansion with our ability to play with dimensionality, really, and not just, once again, be locked into the kind of incorrect way of, I'm using the word incorrect, but in a way that is this icosahedron back here, and then this doesn't really bring it anywhere. All this will do is build octahedrons, because it is an octahedron or a tetrahedron or a hexahedron. That's all about 3 Platonic solids, where the other 2, the phi forms, dodecahedron and icosahedron, are not being presented there. So once this correction happened for me, all of a sudden, sacred geometry just blew up in a good way, it spiraled, let's just say, to all these other frontiers. So I hope that, you try these out and see what happens for you. Please, if you don't know how to draw them, I have a Patreon. I'm walking people through the steps of how to do this. I've got apprenticeships. And other people are just looking at these drawings and starting to post them on the Facebook and on the web in different places, which I highly encourage and really want to see these shared as widely as possible. So onward to the next slide here. Like I said in a previous presentation, like what I discovered with the sacred geometry that I was working with is really what happened here was that the phi ratio and this pentagon, which contains 100% phi all throughout it, right? 1.618 to 1 to 0.618, completely phi, which is often represented as a kind of strong connection to life, integrating with this kind of hexagonal perspective, because you could draw this all from a decagon view, but what happens when we do that slight tilt to the geometry, and how do we get the icosahedron to fit? And so here's this blue dotted line that you're looking at, and that's an icosahedron from that view, those little blue line, all the way around. And then all of a sudden I've got the darkened blue, and that's part of the actual icosahedron edges. Now, like I said, I don't know if we're looking at this icosahedron or this icosahedron. It doesn't really matter. The thing that does matter here, though, is that when I divide these lines, this is all in golden proportion, and it's golden proportion from a pentagon that has unequal edges. We got 3 different edge lengths on this, which when we kind of squish it down like that, it maintains the phi proportion all throughout this. It's just that all 5 of those connecting lines in the middle are just different lengths. But phi is maintained through the transition, let's say, from the decagon view, which is looking straight down. It's now made the transition and reoriented the hexagon view. And I do the same thing with what I call the square view, which is twofold symmetry or 4 lines of symmetry. Basically what I'm saying here is that the sacred geometry is now linked between all 3 of those perspectives solidly, right? So it's really become, for me at least, in the way I go about my drawings, a very unified perspective. And I could take this little kind of squished pentagon here and essentially just place it right over top of the drawing of that icosahedron to show you where the lines are, that this is not a distorted form. I mean, it's still flat, so this is slightly angled, but that's no different than this being slightly angled, and you're just looking at it from that perspective. So that's really what happened. This is just a little bit more closer to the angles that you need to draw it from that view. And now this little in the inside here, which I show here in the previous slide in red, well, that's the dodecahedron face that's inside this pentagon. So if I turn that pentagon like this, well, there's your dodecahedron face that's part of the transition. So it all goes and integrates 100% smoothly through a rotation, basically. And here is these laid out flat for you here on the ground. And this one kind of even squishier one here, well, that one relates to this angled one. And that's, when I'm looking at this big dodecahedron, well, that's this top half of it. And then this is the face of it right here, and that's this one. So this form here, which I'll show you at the end, like I've said, that's connected and made up of just those 2 types of pentagons. There's no traditional pentagon in it, that is the perfect one. This is an imperfect, perfect dodecahedron, because it does maintain a high level of integrity with the phi ratio throughout it. And of course, the same thing with the icosahedron. You see this dotted line back here. Well, inside this little icosahedron here, that's this inner portion of it right here. And that larger face is the portion right here, right? That's the one I was just showing you previously. So this one is constructed out of 2 types of pentagons, and I believe these are connected to 4D representations of the forms. Now, a while ago, I did a video where this was just starting to awaken for me, at least in my evolving consciousness. This one, it was about the 600 cell tetraplex, or at least in that video, I kind of worked my way up to it. So go back and check out some of my videos because you'll see my evolution. And I really just did a 1 hour presentation of 18 videos condensed into one, so you can get a sense of where I've been going with this. This is about the story of the golden life, not the golden life, the golden circles. That is, this video is in that whole progression, 18 video progression. There's a whole playlist for it. This will probably be added into it because it's clarifying a lot more of my understanding of this. So this is the tetraplex, and the way you could think about this sacred geometry in these drawings, because a four-dimensional form is just something we have a hard time grasping and understanding, but you can almost look at it as like a four-dimensional form. If you shine the light on it and its shadow was cast, what you would actually get would be a 3D form of the form. And with this 600 cell, what you actually get when you do that from one view of it, shine the light through it, you're going to get projection of this form right here, which is the Icosahedron dodecahedron. This forms that projection. So this is kind of like a three-dimensional projection, or a 4D projection in the third dimension. And then what I've done here is take this 3D dimension and basically brought it down into the second dimension. So technically, this little diagram here is a visual that shows here is an actual two-dimensional image, that's 2D, of a three-dimensional shadow. So this is the three-dimensional shadow of some four-dimensional wire frame that's out there with light going through it, okay? So that's a little, you got to contemplate that one a little bit, but think about yourself in that context. Your 3D form, maybe you're actually a shadow of a fourth dimensional reality, right? And that all these geometries are actually swirling around you. And I've got a nice little image, animation at the end of this to kind of show what that might be like to be a shadow of a fourth dimensional reality just showing up in the third dimension. And I'm coming to you here as a two-dimensional projection on the screen. So, this is part of multidimensionality from a geometrical standpoint. I know the dimensions are discussed in so many more ways. I realize daylight savings time is tomorrow. Let me close that. Let's get that off there too now. Okay, so this is a 600 cell. The cool thing about this, what I was really just excited about back in those previous videos, was this contains the geometries of every convex regular polytope, meaning the 5 Platonic solids, because they're the regular polytopes, in the first 4 dimensions. So that's all 4 dimensions, except the 5 cell, which I believe that's due probably because this is made of tetraplex. It's all tetrahedrons of, and this one is 600 tetrahedral cells, and the 120 cell, which is the dual of this form. So in duality, just like the icosahedron and dodecahedron are dual forms, well, this Icosahedron dodecahedron that we're looking at, the 600 cell, is the 4-dimensional analog of the icosahedron. So this is the 4D representation of that. And I'll show you the 120 cell in just a moment. But, I don't know how people feel about this because, all these are integrated all at the same time. But, it's like when we first draw that seed of life, when we draw these 2 tetrahedrons in it, it's kind of like, well, that was a very basic way to relate to sacred geometry, the star tetrahedron, because there's so many more stellations. Well, that was the, kind of where we were, quite a while ago. Now, very popular is the 64 tetrahedron grid, which is still based on the cube and the octahedron. There's so much great science and research going on about that. But I believe Coxeter, HSM Coxeter, back in the 70s and throughout his career of geometrician and mathematician, was really paving the groundway. He was like the Pythagoras of our era, basically laying out the next wave of where we're going with this. It's just that my feeling is that our sacred geometry hadn't really caught up to where he was going with that. And I feel like a lot of this imagery that I've been sharing with all the stellations and all the other things are starting to integrate where we could potentially be going with this, of these types of images and forms integrating more into the steady stream and flow of consciousness, which is connected to our sacred geometry, our sacred art. And of course, once we get further into this, our creation of sacred space and temple building, rebuilding those connections of harmony and peace and love with one another through those types of connections. That's really like where we're going in the next eras, you know, as we're moving around the yugas. So, you know, great work from Coxeter. I mean, just completely upgrading the sacred geometry. And I hope that what I'm presenting here helps to integrate all the amazing discoveries that he was coming up with and bring it into an ability for you to contemplate, for you to draw, hand drawn. And I'll show you this image at the end too. But, you know, let me just talk about this first. This is the 120 cell. I just figured out how to draw this yesterday. I was months ago trying to figure this out, you know, because I had to use the golden circles in a way that was a little bit more complex. But back then I just couldn't, I didn't understand the golden circles enough to be able to pull it off. But just yesterday, I finally, or 2 days ago, discovered how to basically connect the dots to create a 120 cell, which is, composed of 120 dodecahedral cells with 4 dodecahedrons meeting at each vertex. So this is just, you know, highly complex structure. And I always like to test out my drawings to actually see if they show up or actually related to the Wikipedia drawings that I have access to. So here is the 120 cell Wikipedia drawing, and here is my drawing underneath that without all the circles and lines, without all those circles, I mean, and just the line drawing of it. And I just removed that kind of like to show the level of, you know, accuracy that this is a, you know, one-for-one projection of this. And it's all done with these overlapping circles, which seem so chaotic and in chaos here, but actually contain the connecting points to create all these little harmonious phi relationships of all these little dodecahedrons that are contained within this. So to me, that was just a huge kind of breakthrough and discovery in my relationship to sacred geometry. And as you can see, this is all done on the computer. But really, you know, okay, here's the next image, but I could show you, we could do this hand drawn, right? Like, so here's my hand drawn image of this that I just did yesterday morning, because I really want to test all this out to make sure that this is something that you're able to connect with and do. This would definitely be like a master class, and I might offer something like this to do a 3-hour session. Let me know if anybody's interested in that. You got to have a little bit of experience with sacred geometry to really walk through the circle diagram, figure out the phi circles, where they go, and then go through each of these little connecting lines. It took me 1 hour to do, a little over an hour just by myself. So I'd imagine it would be, you know, a good chunk of time for a whole, you know, decent sized group of people. But as you could see, like, this is my initial phi circles right in here. And this is the dodecahedron right here in the middle. That is the corrected version, go way back to the beginning of this presentation, which is the accurate dimension, you know, the accurate projection of the 3D dodecahedron in the second dimension, which is now actually probably showing up like this in the fourth dimension, right? And because it's right here in the center and it's connecting to all these other dodecahedron that are around it. So this was the foundation right here. This is really why, you know, or part of the reason why this matters so much, because you have to add the phi ratio to this, or you will never come close to bringing this in forward in sacred geometry and upgrading our techniques with the compass and straight edge and making these really applicable to the people, you know, that you don't need to just be a computer genius to like do all sorts of crazy animations, or somebody just figuring this out in some elite college experience or elite little dark room somewhere. This is like right here for you to be have accessibility to, so you can enter into that contemplation on your own. So here's the little phi circles, but look, as I go, this is, you know, as I go all the way out, you know, and trying to make these circles as best to phi as I can, you know, relying and trusting in the pattern we get way out on this back edge here, and here we are. This is the golden calipers, golden ratio calipers. These are pretty much, it's funny, my drawing actually ended up to be about 1 inch here, and that divided this into the 0.618 and the reciprocal on the other side. I was like, oh, that felt really good. Okay, so I want to just kind of summarize things here a little bit and start to get into wrapping things up. You know, this is, well, I just called that cube. I was going to give it some sort of fancy name. I didn't know what to call it because originally I called this diagram on the right here, Eve's icosahedron. I don't really know if that's going to resonate with people too much, but that felt appropriate for me at the time in relating to this design here. But, you know, maybe it's the golden circles diagram, maybe it's the golden circles. I'm not sure. The golden circle template is definitely behind this, but we've got Metatron's cube over here, which many people are probably familiar with this hexagonal design and doing all the connecting lines. And you look at this image here on the right, and you could see that, boy, from first glance, other than just looking at the background template here, boy, they look very, very similar, don't they? But they're really not similar because there's one little adjustment here, and you see where these phi relationship circles are. That's now, the circles are integral. That's what I'm saying. The circles are totally integral to the lines. Here, the circles, it doesn't matter where you put this diagram, you could start it anywhere and the lines will just keep going in hexagon and equilateral triangles. But in order to get that little bend, which is so important to the icosahedron, the phi ratio is included within this, and we start our drawing here at this phi ratio circle, and then now we've got the dodecahedron, the icosahedron, the stellation of the dodecahedron, and this is just a little sampling of, you know, many of the drawings I've done and a lot more that I didn't even crunch in here of what comes out of or where this leads in furthering discovery. Whereas this version here, it's so uniform that it only wants to work really within just certain proportions of thirds and halves, because this is what this template really is, or sixths, you know, really designed are, and fourths. It doesn't add the kind of irrationality of this design here of phi. So what we get going on is we get the octahedron, we get the tetrahedron, we put both of those together, star tetrahedron, octahedron, which of course is the cube. And then, you know, we've got other variations I'm just going to show too, because you have other Catalan and Archimedean solids in here, cube octahedron, and basically the rhombic dodecahedron, which is a 12-sided rhombic face. I really love that form too. That's, you know, the way it's depicted in here, if we were to draw it, was we would just basically turn our cube upside down and just have these lines like this. And to me, that's always kind of represented what the rhombic dodecahedron looks like. So that's what we're really getting on this side. And this is what is like a little bit of pitch. This is what you get on this side. Then you get this on this side. It's not really like that. But, you know, this is really what you do kind of get on this side, or at least what's happened for me. You get all these Poinsett Kepler the Kepler star polyhedra, right? You get all those designs and patterns within this, you know, the star mother, which I have some videos with Dan Winter now, and looking at the star mother and the star child. This is the star child geometry with the rhombic trichontahedron and other forms that Coxeter was talking about, like the stellation of the trichontahedron, the small and the great one, they're in there. You know, you get the this whole sequence all in here, right? So you still get the cube, you still get the octahedron. It's just that the whole orientation of the drawing is now not focused on the cube being aligned hexagonally this way. It's got to be tilted, because as my videos I say, I'll be repeating things in the future like this. This has 5 cubes in it. So there's, because the dodecahedron has 5 cubes. So the emphasis is on 5 cubes here rather than 1 cube. So, you know, if you want to keep Metatron in this, just call this Metatron's cubes. You know, that's a way to keep that tradition alive if you like that. I'm not attached to the name. I am attached to the correct geometry of the forms because of how much beauty and, you know, enjoyment and expansion they've created for me. Here's the two 600 and 600 cell, the icosahedron analog, and the 120 cell, the dodecahedron analog. Okay, so that's just one template. And of course, we can do this from other views, but a new pattern that emerged from this whole hexagonal orientation, which I'm not going to go into. Check out the Star Mother video or the Star Child video. Both of those get into this implosion template, which takes our one uniform plane, which essentially these two drawings are still working in kind of one plane. You could build out and out and out further, but we're not really changing like scale and variance, because once we start to make these circles expand outward, which is based on the non-destructive compression, like Dan Winter talks about, a 5-ratio golden proportion circles non-destructively, like a sharing wave pattern that goes into this. These circles get smaller and smaller and smaller, and then we can draw all those geometries in an expansive or a kind of imploding type of state. At each one of these little circles, there's a dodecahedron, icosahedron, rhombic tricontahedron. If you have the rhombic tricontahedron, you've got the icosahedron. You've got the all the Platonic solids, essentially, all the truncations at multiple scales of invariance, non-destructively collapsing with the 4D forms, and 5D forms and things all are in here too. So that still probably need to be many have to be discovered. They're discovered and things are on Wikipedia, but like, how do you relate to this for yourself is basically what I'm saying. Is like, yes, we can look at all these pictures, but there's nothing like experience in sacred geometry and starting to put the pencil to the paper and starting to do this yourself, because then you come into direct contact and relationship rather than just hearing my words or seeing these images. They're beautiful to meditate on if you gravitate to this, but you get into a contemplative state when you sit with this and work with it, and enter into that dialogue and communication of how it's specifically for you, like what seeds are in this for you that will enrich your life. So here is the dodecaplex, which is what that dodecahedron, the 120 cell, as well as the 600 cell here on the right. These are highly complex, images. This one is really much more difficult. But from the pentagon decagon view, which is looking at it, from the top down orientation from the vertex, let's just say, rather than the triangular face. Well, the symmetry is a little cleaner. They're easier to draw. And, we get the awesome imagery as well, which really, to me, resonates with the geometric structure of DNA and the implosion very well, because we're looking at the top flat face of the dodecahedron with the icosahedron point up here. And that is where the vortex energy is going into the dodecahedron like that, at each of these faces, as the implosion, or explosion would be happening. And this all relates to the gravity collapse. And Dan Winter talks about how at each stage of that progression, basically our whole physical and etheric universe are showing up along that scale and variance using the golden proportion in relationship to the Planck scale. Okay. Okay, that was really the last slide. I want to share just kind of one video on the YouTube here, or not YouTube, Wikipedia. It's over here with the 120 cell. And now this is, really what our flat two-dimensional image, of course, this is still 2D, is really trying to depict what's really going on with a fourth dimensional object when we rotate it like this. So, picture your geometry around your body. We like to, think of the torus field and things like that. This is another visualization. It's almost like soap bubbles going on in here. And you might be a projection of this type of geometry around us, that is really just collapsing into the third dimension as basically kind of a shadow of this much greater dimensional geometry at even higher and higher dimensions. Because remember, this is just the fourth dimension, and there's fifth and sixth and so forth. So one more little projection here. This is a cool one because it's more from the inside. So, get into this one. This is on just 120 cell Wikipedia site. you're like you're in the soap bubbles, you're in maybe the quantum verse. In fact, way back, I saw was his name Greg Braden, maybe. He talks about a conscious connected universe. He actually had this slide on there, showing this kind of quantum connection and relationship between all of us. And although my drawings here, that I'm doing are totally, look very static to this, but these are psychoactive triggering, just like this highly awesome animation is, but they are also working on your consciousness when you're starting to relate and connect and draw or work with these, even if they're static 2D. There's a lot that's going on in relationship to how you're integrating that at greater levels of dimensionality within your beingness. Okay, so that was really a lot of fun. I hope that I clarified a lot of things in the beginning about how I've been talking about the icosahedron, dodecahedron from the Metatron's cube version, and displayed what the real differences are with the golden circles version and how that portrays itself, and then how that then expands to everything I just showed you and the rest of that. Let's just quickly show you some of these cool shapes. These are not built, of course, to the same size, but here is the regular dodecahedron. You could put a circle around it. Here's my flattened one. And there it is, like this, right? So I think this is just like pulling a fourth dimensional shape out of it. And once you rotate a fourth dimensional shape, all the angles change and everything. But remember, this is part of this piece right here. See? And the other version of that little squished face right here, that just plugs in there just like that, and it maintains the whole phi proportion along that. It would be like this. So it's really, pretty cool because it adds a little bit more variety than just working with blue struts, because that's all you need is just blue struts for the octahedron, dodecahedron. Here you got the blue struts because those are flat. Here's the icosahedron version of that. And then, these are all in phi proportion to the cross sections that would be in here for the 5-pointed stars in each of those. So I thought that was just really neat, but it was my doorway to continue to explore the fourth dimension. So the only last piece I'll say about this is not a lot more visuals. I just wanted to show you this one more time because I think this is just so essential to just get a sense and get an eye, like, oh, see this material that you're being shown regularly and by many geometers. It's just in so many books. Just spot this, get it in your frame of reference, that when you're looking at these, or you're looking at this, which is an icosahedron, or you're looking at this flat face, it's definitely not aggressive. It's definitely not antagonistic. It really is to uplift and raise humanity's awareness and consciousness, because over time, we may start to gravitate to this. And when we do start to gravitate to this, well, then these other doorways that I just showed you started to present and open, and they can be taken so much further and expanded upon in the future generations than I'll probably ever do. And so that's really exciting to me. And like I said, Coxeter's work really started to lay such a great foundation. So I would just say, if you have an attachment, or if you're feeling like that Metatron's cube is like just how it's always been, it will always be that way, just be open, explore the possibilities. Listen to this video again, look at the images. If you're into drawing it, if you've drawn it yourself, you'll start to feel and see the differences maybe. And, just see where the levels of attachment are within that, and why, what's the difference? What's holding one back from maybe looking at things from a new perspective, or wanting to try something KNEW out and see how that might resonate with you. So yeah, much love and appreciation to you for watching this video. I hope there was some clarity, or that was clearly presented for you. And until next time, I'll be sharing more content. And please check out, subscribe to the channel if you like it. Check out the New Geometry on Patreon. And I have a New Geometers Facebook group. And I'm in the middle of starting my apprenticeship now, but I'll be running apprenticeships in drawing sacred geometry for this foreseeable future. So yes, once again, much love and appreciation. Have a very awesome day.